Hi, I'm Jake Kouns, CEO of Risk-Based Security. Welcome to this edition of The Right Security, the show which we spend time talking with leaders and veterans in the security space, tackling the issues of the day. Hello, everyone. With me today, I've got Mark Arnold, as Vice President of LARES. I've known Mark for a very long time, has a deep background into cloud security, vulnerability management, risk management, and a whole host of other leadership topics. Really excited to have you with us today, Mark. How are you doing?
I'm doing well here in Massachusetts. How about you?
Doing great. I'm glad you're here with us. Today, we're going to talk about a little bit of COVID, a little bit of virtual schooling, and from a standpoint of what's going on with security and what we're sort of concerned about and what we're anticipating that might happen in the school world. And you give us a little bit of your thoughts on what you're seeing so far from your point of view, what's sort of happening, the dialogue around schools and security?
Well, you and I kind of chatted about this previously. My wife is a vice principal of a school in a neighboring district. And so I hear about cybersecurity preparedness and awareness for schools more than I want to say. So my wife keeps me on point and engaged in both hearing about preparations in her school district, but then also preparations in our children's school district. I think here in Massachusetts, there is a overarching and well-balanced leadership from the Department of Education. Our DESE, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, has put out tremendous guidances and recommendations around individual IT staff in various districts. And so what we're seeing across cities in Massachusetts is a kind of a unified approach to preparing our students to be both in remote or hybrid settings as the school year comes upon us.
Gotcha. When the school year came to an abrupt halt across the United States and the March timeframe, we saw quite a few school districts around the world try to transfer to virtual learning with different levels of success and problems. Mostly, it seemed like it was just trying to get the hang of actually using technology and video conferencing those things. But almost immediately, we saw the rise of what we've been now calling Zoom bombing, right? People dropping into classes and whatnot. Do you think that problem has been solved? Or maybe for our viewers that now aren't so clear with Zoom bombing, can you give us some perspective on what we saw then and what might potentially be a concern upcoming year here?
Yeah, we kind of wrote about that when it first broke several months back. We saw instances of that, not necessarily in our school districts, but because of the examples that we're seeing in the business world and other verticals and organizations, we were able to take that data, those experiences, and help guide our particular school districts on how to prepare for such attacks. I would say now, given the amount of resources that Zoom and other platforms have poured into making sure that these video conferencing experiences are secure, I think we're going to have a better feel going into the school year, having gotten past that initial onslaught of attacks through video conferencing.
Yeah. For those readers of the Risk-Based Security blog, we covered the Zoom problems pretty detailed. So if you haven't read that or you want to, you can visit our website and check that out. And we will say, while Zoom has gotten a lot of attention, our research showed that it wasn't just Zoom with problems. All of the remote video conferencing had various levels of privacy concerns, vulnerabilities, and really misconfigurations where they were posting the password and no matter where you go, the trolls will jump in and unfortunately cause some problems. So one of the things in our most recent research that we've done here, we started to investigate device security, right? Laptop security, versus Chromebooks. And in particular, for those students, mostly in secondary schools and high schools, that were given Windows machines. They needed a little more horsepower than what they thought a Chromebook can do. When they went off the network in March, it appears that some districts, they might not have been maintained since then. Can you give us a sense of sort of what you're seeing, or what, whether it's in your home state or across the US, about actual device laptop security, perhaps, of what the students are using for their virtual schooling?
So I can talk about that both from a LARES perspective and then from a family personal perspective. So from a LARES perspective, we're seeing, as you noted in your wonderful blog about this, a lot of districts are understaffed. I can think of one particular assessment that we've had in recent months, where it's basically a 1-2-man team. We were able to pop passwords for the entire district, over the district's AD servers within a matter of minutes. And this is just one person in a particular district who's in the fire already. Without even thinking about these students coming online remotely, he's having other fires. That says to us, a lot of districts are undermanned, may not be prepared well enough to not only manage their networks, but then to manage this additional onslaught of remote users. And so that's one of our main concerns that we're seeing in our assessments. Here in Massachusetts, again, it's been a unified approach, right? So even in my own district, we've had superintendents have to walk back statements of bring your own devices. And in my town of Ashland, basically he had to walk back and say, yeah, we forgive me, I initially misspoke about bringing your own devices, those would be okay. But then kind of fell in line with our Department of Education that in our school districts, the top level recommendation is managed, Chromebook type environments. I would even say in my wife's district, kind of solidifying on a lot of Google platforms. So even moving away from Zoom, so that everything is managed from the Chromebook to Google's platform, that there's a unified technology approach to secure students.
Makes sense. We've had a lot of people say to us, are you saying that Windows is bad and I shouldn't use Windows? I should only use a Google Chromebook? Our initial sort of feedback is that we're not really saying that, but they have different, they're different platforms, so they need to be managed differently in those regards. Do you believe that to be the case? Do you have different thoughts on, how parents should react, whether it's a Chromebook or a Windows laptop?
We've had this discussion on the LARES Slack channel. Chris Nickerson is like, Windows, if you manage it correctly, you'll be fine. We kind of take the position that a computer is a computer. It really comes down to making sure or ensuring that those devices are managed end to end into that network, providing guidances for the home networks as well. And I think if we follow those guidelines, some of the guidelines that you've discussed on your website and your blogs, that we've discussed on ours, and that we've seen since remote work and remote telework and teleschooling has really taken off, that if you follow the guidelines, you should be okay.
Gotcha. So, a lot of times security folks get accused of creating the FUD, right? The fear, the uncertainty, doubt, trying to make something seem like it's a huge problem when it's really not, just so we could sell services, right? We were so concerned about what we saw with the insecure laptops that we actually reached out to all the Virginia districts here where we're headquartered, as well as all the state Department of Education's, excuse me, to let them know what we were seeing. I have to tell you that the responses that we got were not great. We either were completely ignored, or we were told to be removed from the mailing list, which it wasn't a mailing list. It was really, we were trying to advise. And the final one that we were mostly told was, here's the email address if you're trying to sell us stuff, kind of pushing us to a vendor approach.
Sure.
I know that school districts have so much going on right now. It's such unprecedented times, just trying to figure out how to get the kids back and keep, teachers and students safe and all those sorts of things. Why do you think it's so hard for security and security professionals to give advice, free advice and help to school districts in time of this, where we actually do believe that this is a really significant issue for our kids?
I think it's a matter of the school districts themselves. Which ones are forward thinking, which ones are kind of ahead of the curve on preparations. Very intense preparations in my wife's school district. Look at all the platforms, several sessions with teachers and educators, getting them acclimated, even walking them through security configurations to kind of get it in their DNA. It's not something that they were pushing down their throats, but basically saying this is the new normal, whether it be hybrid or fully remote. We need teachers to be fully invested, fully engaged. Ironically, when you sent me the link to the blog, I sent it immediately to one of my fraternity brothers in Henrico County, there in Richmond, and he kind of shrugged it off, which kind of suggested to me that there doesn't seem to be a general consensus across the school districts in some states, maybe some communities, some jurisdictions that everyone's kind of going at it alone, as opposed to kind of having that concerted effort to get ready and prepare for the new normal. Not to push fear, but to say, here's how we're going about it, and have that very programmatic, guided approach to getting folks through this process.
Yeah. So we obviously were concerned because a lot of what's happening is the devices' webcams are being turned on. And with insecure software running, if you start sort of thinking about what could happen, threat modeling, looking at those kinds of things, one of our concerns was not just sort of the Zoom bombing, but now you can get control of the machine. And could we have situations where bedrooms are being used as makeshift sort of, schools for people, right? Desks and whatnot. Could they be spied on and other things happening? Unfortunately, we've already seen multiple occasions. I think we have 3 or 4 instances already in Denver, Texas, and a few other places where they're back to school already, and they're starting to see some of these things happening. Not so much the webcam stuff, but it seems like another bit of the Zoom bombing, threatening students, putting inappropriate pictures. We're starting to see this happen. It's only been small. Do you think that this is something that's going to continue to expand? Are we in for, as more students go back over the next couple of weeks, are we going to see more of this, or do you think people are going to lose interest in messing around with students?
No, I think the exact opposite. So we talked a lot about security, cybersecurity. We don't talk a lot about safety as well. So harping on safety, I think this well of student bodies that we're seeing, being brought into remote learning, environments. I think those who would seek to harm our students, seek to harm our children, would take. I think they're going to take even more and more advantage, if they can, to impact the safety of our kids. And so we have to be very diligent about that. I don't think we, as we're focused on building access to remote education, I think we also have to be equally focused on who can access our children, who can access us via these platforms. And that remains a concern of mine going forward. We have talked about it, you and I and our parents, about our kids playing on PS4s and some of the other gaming platforms. Make sure you're not talking to strangers. I quizzed my son the other night about his platforms. He said, "Dad, I got 2FA everywhere." I said, "Well, what about your school platforms?" He's like, "Oh, I don't know about that." But there's the mindset that we're driving within family and also within our districts about safety as well as cybersecurity.
Oh, that's great. And So let's talk a little bit here as we close out the show. Let's first talk about parents. What can parents do? You just mentioned talking to your children. What are some other things that you would recommend that they should consider from a cybersecurity and safety standpoint as the school year progresses?
I'm gonna take a cue from my wife, who's made sure that I'm engaged in every preparation meeting. So there's a cyber preparedness meeting coming up for our town, and if those don't exist in your town, if you're not aware of those in your town, make sure you look for those. Be a part of those conversations. Stay engaged in the town and the local websites for your departments of education. There are plenty of updates on those sites. If you're not, thoroughly, impressed by what your districts are putting out there, take some initiative. Look at some other districts. There are plenty of guidelines out there from that perspective to prepare for the home and hybrid schooling situations. Beyond that, we've both talked on both our platforms about home office, making sure that we follow some of the guidelines, some of the helps that are out there to basically look for configurations on network devices, understand how our providers are providing security helps through those platforms. We use Eero in this house. We kind of got off Verizon's and kind of jumped onto a forward-looking platform, but there are others out there as well. And then again, talk with your children, talk with your students, and make sure that they're comfortable as the school year comes upon us, that they're prepared in every way to engage in their school year.
Makes a lot of sense. Yeah, and I think for parents that may be listening, don't let the technology overwhelm you. Some simple things like we've talked about in the past, that the webcam cover those up when not being in use. If you do have a nicer home router, maybe creating a guest network where you can put the children's devices on, so maybe that doesn't cause a problem into your working from home. I know we've talked a little bit now. All of a sudden, with all these students going back, does that expose corporations to more problems of potential unauthorized access? So what are your thoughts about what schools should consider, and any advice for folks that are maybe understaffed, under budget? They're trying to make sure they can keep kids safe in the cybersecurity and safety standpoint.
From an assessment perspective, we've asked people to be open to the notion of going through some risk assessments, general risk assessments. We, like I said before, our small sample set of school districts need help, and we would say to our listeners, both LARES and risk-based security are two firms that firmly believe that helping out our neighbors, helping out our school districts is, one of our commitments to our communities based on the industry that we're in. And so we would say to some school districts who are kind of pushing back on preparation or feel underwhelmed, be open to reach out to folks like yourself. You gave plenty of resources in your blog, that kind of was kind of like an invitation to engagement and getting prepared. And then I kind of tout Massachusetts' approach to this. We basically got ahead of this going back to 2018. If you look at our Department of Education portal around cybersecurity, that we have been kind of pushing school districts to go to managed information technology approaches to this problem or to this way of schooling. And so you saw that even in my own town, as I mentioned. Everyone has their own devices, but the device from DOE was worth following go managed if you can. The other thing that I want to say before we close that's kind of dear to my heart is this disparity that we're seeing in school districts. So I live in a fairly wealthy school district. My wife is even more financed town next to ours, but there are others who don't have the economics to get on these platforms, or don't have access, don't have the bandwidth to get some of the advantages that some of the other school districts are benefiting from. And so I'm thinking about their safety and their, not just their security, but their access to networks and to resources for schooling. And so as we are talking about the haves who have the devices and the access, we should also equally be concerned about those who don't have the same resources that we're talking about today.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I know you and I have talked about this at length. And I know that some districts are trying hard to, again, provide devices to families that may unfortunately not have it. And a lot of folks, unfortunately, don't have access to internet. So they're trying to provide sort of the hotspots and whatnot. So other than that, I'm not aware of more that's going on to do that. If obviously you or any of our listeners have ideas or ways that we can, the community can help with that, I think that'd be some great things. So I appreciate you bringing that up too. I think that sort of covers our topic for today. I think in closing, I'd say there are, there's resources available, right? You can go to the Risk-Based Security website and to our blog. We've got articles about Zoom that can bring you up to speed about some of the concerns around, virtual sort of web meetings and things like that. And then more specifically, device security. Good news is we have just now today published a new page. We're calling, so if you go to the website, and I believe we'll put it in the show notes, it's riskbasedsecurity.com/virtual-school. And that's a collection of basically every link that we could find and resource out there that would help folks that want to read more. So if anyone's listening and has some additional ideas they want to add, please let us know. Mark, appreciate you spending the time. But before I go, tell me what's going on in your world at LARES. What are you guys up to? Tell me what's happening.
A lot of things. A lot of adversarial engagements that we're working with different verticals. A heavy focus on credit unions as well, the credit union space. Partnering with friends of ours in the industry to kind of pivot to some other services. So we're looking at managing attack services, specifically in credit union space, but thinking broader about that as well. And then, basically, the main conversation today, looking at our communities and how to give back. So there's been some outreach in some of our open office hours to school districts, kind of extending the helping hand to those districts to kind of bring them through some of the challenges that they're experiencing right now.
Well, Mark, always a pleasure talking with you. I appreciate it. Thanks for those who watched us on this episode of The Right Security, and we look forward to having you again next time.
Awesome.